Snow was falling like ash from the sky. The north was quiet, but not peaceful. There was always a storm waiting behind the silence. Jon Snow stood on the edge of a cliff, watching the wildlings move like ants across the frozen ground. He had once been their enemy, then their prisoner, and now, maybe something more. Behind him, Ygritte stood with her arms crossed. "You look like a crow who forgot how to fly," she said with a teasing smile. Jon didn't smile back. "They won't follow me." "Not all of them." She stepped closer. "They'll follow Tormund. And Tormund listens to you. Maybe not always. But he trusts you." That was the problem. Trust in the north was like fire. Burned too fast and died too soon. Tormund Gentsbane had gathered the remaining wildling clans, trying to keep them from fighting each other after Mance Rayder's death. But there were whispers. Of war. Of betrayal. Of a new king beyond the wall. Jon turned to face her. "If we don't unite them now, they'll destroy each other before the Night King even lifts a finger." Grit's face turned serious. "Then maybe it's time you stop asking and start leading." Later that night, Jon, Ygritte, and Tormund sat inside a large fur tent lit by a flickering fire. The heat barely touched the cold in their bones. Tormund tore into a piece of goat meat and grunted. "Half the clans want to fight the crows. The other half want to steal from the ones who've already crossed south. None of them give a shit about White Walkers." Jon leaned forward. "That's why we need to show them. Make them see what's coming." Tormund narrowed his eyes. "And how do you plan to do that, Lord Crow? Scare them with bedtime stories?" "No," Jon said. "Take them to the ruins at Hardhome. Let them see the dead with their own eyes." The name chilled the air in the tent. Hardhome wasn't just ruins, it was a graveyard. And those graves didn't stay filled. Ygritte looked at Tormund. "You said it yourself. They need to believe. Let them see what the wall was really built to stop." Tormund sighed and set down his meat. "If we do this, and it fails, they'll turn on us. Call us cursed. Call us fools. Or they'll follow us," Jon said. "And we can lead them somewhere safer. Somewhere past the wall, not into it." The next morning, they began the journey north. The three of them, Jon, Ygritte, and Tormund, moved from camp to camp, gathering the strongest voices. Some were eager. Others laughed in their faces. One chief even spit at Jon's feet. But day by day, the numbers grew. Old enemies walked beside each other. Bows were lowered. Fires shared. The wildlings, who had never truly been one people, started to act like they were. Jon spoke each night before the fire. Not as a lord, not as a crow, but as a man who had seen the end of the world. He told them about the Night King, about the army of the dead, about the fight that didn't care about clans or castles. "We all die," he told them, "but if we stand together, we can choose how we die. Not hunted, not broken, but as free folk who didn't kneel to death." They listened. Not all, but enough. On the seventh night, they reached Hardhome. What was left of it? And the dead were waiting. Hardhome was colder than death. The air was heavy, filled with the kind of silence that made your skin crawl. Broken bones crunched under boots as Jon led the way, his sword ready, though even Longclaw felt too small in his hand now. Behind him marched hundreds of wildlings men, women, children, many still doubting, many still mocking. But that mockery vanished the moment they saw the first corpse. It was twisted, half buried in ice, eyes wide open with a fear that had never left. More bodies appeared frozen in place, clinging to burned-out huts, some curled around their children. A baby's skull lay cracked near a crumbled fence. No blood. Just silence and frostbite. Tormund spat. "This isn't war. This is a warning." Ygritte kept her bow ready, scanning the hills. They didn't just die. They were hunted. Jon's voice was low. "And they'll rise again." That's the part they never believe until it happens. They built fires, posted guards, and tried to make camp. But no one really slept. The wildlings kept their weapons close and their children closer. That night, Jon stood before them again, not with words of hope, but truth. This is what waits for all of us. They don't care about your clan. They don't care about your pride. They want you as part of their army. Dead or alive, a woman from the Ice Rivers clan stood. And what do you offer instead, Crow? More death? Marching south to serve men who always saw us as dirt? Jon didn't flinch. I offer you a chance to fight back. To build something real. A home. Not just survive like ghosts in the snow. There was silence, and Tormund rose. I once thought Jon Snow was just another crow with a stick up his ass. But I've seen him bleed for wildlings. I've seen him fight like a mad dog to keep us alive. He ain't one of you, and he ain't one of them. He's something else. Something worth following. A murmur spread through the crowd. For the first time, something changed. A few nodded. Some raised fists. A feeling Jon hadn't expected to see again. Belief. But belief doesn't stop the dead. The next morning, the first scream shattered the cold silence. A boy had wandered from camp. They found him pale and trembling, his face scratched, his words broken. They're coming. They're here. There. Not breathing. The forest behind Hardhome was no longer still. Shadows moved between trees. Not animals. Not men. Jon didn't wait. He grabbed Loneclaw and shouted, "Everyone to arms! If you see eyes like ice, cut them down." The wildlings panicked at first, but Jewett's voice rang out. "Bows ready. We fight for the living." Tormund let out a roar and charged ahead with an axe in each hand, beard wild, eyes blazing. "Come on, you icy bastards." And then they saw them figures rising from the snow, once human, now pale and cold and hungry. Some were warriors, others were children, all twisted by death. The White Walkers watched from the hills, quiet commanders of the silent army. The first clash was chaos. Screams, steel, blood, and then silence again as the dead refused to fall. Jon swung Loneclaw and cut down a white that was once a wildling chief. It didn't cry. It didn't bleed. It just kept moving until its head was gone. "They don't fear pain," Jon shouted. "Only fire and dragonglass." But they had little of either. Grit's arrows found eyes and throats, but even she looked shaken. "There's too many. We can't hold this ground." Jon knew she was right. Hardhome would be their grave if they stayed. He turned to Tormund, blood on both their faces. "We can't win this fight. Not here. We need to run." Tormund didn't argue. He grabbed a horn and blew it loud, the call of retreat echoing across the hills. The wildlings began to flee, but the dead chased without mercy. Jon looked back once and saw the White Walkers still standing on the ridge, watching like gods. One raised an icy hand. More corpses began to rise, and Jon realized something worse than death. They weren't here to kill them. They were here to send a message. The retreat from Hardhome wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. They ran through the snow like hunted animals, but the dead didn't tire, didn't stop, didn't think. They just followed. One after another, wildlings fell slashed, dragged, torn apart only to rise moments later and turn on their own. Jon stayed at the back of the fleeing group, sword dripping with blackened blood, his breath ragged in the frozen air. Grit's arrows flew past him, hitting whites before they reached the weaker ones. Tormund swung both axes like a madman, smashing skulls and roaring louder than any war horn. But they were losing ground. By the time the survivors reached the cliffs near the boats they'd hidden, half the group was gone. Mothers wept. Men screamed for brothers who never answered. And the worst part? The silence that followed. The kind of silence only death leaves behind. The remaining wildlings stared at Jon with wide, horrified eyes. "You brought us here," one man hissed. "You said we needed to see?" Jon didn't flinch. "Now you believe?" The man looked down, ashamed. They boarded the boats in a rush. Children were passed down like sacks. Tormund threw a wounded man over his shoulder, yelling, "You die on your feet, not on the snow." As they pushed off the shore, Jon looked back. The dead had stopped, standing in rows on the icy ridge, as if mocking them. Then one of the White Walkers stepped forward and raised its hand again. The bodies left behind, friends, lovers, even the dead children began to twitch. They stood, and the wildlings saw their own kin stare back with frozen eyes. A silence fell over the boats. Even the wind seemed afraid to speak. Ygritte gripped Jon's hand tight. "They don't just kill, Jon. They steal what you love and throw it back at you." He couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. When they returned south of the wall, the mood had changed. No one laughed. No one challenged Jon anymore. They looked at him like a ghost, like he'd come back with the truth, and the weight of it had broken him. Jon stood before them that night, again, but his voice was colder now. Sharper. "We saw Hardhome. You all did. That is what waits for us. They are building an army, and every wildling that dies strengthens it. If we fight each other now, we feed the very thing we should be destroying." Someone shouted from the back. "You expect us to fight for the crows now?" Jon shook his head. "I expect you to fight for your children, for your future, or die and rise again with no soul." Tormund stepped up beside him, beard stiff with frozen blood. "I lost brothers at Hardhome. I saw them rise with dead eyes. I'd rather burn than be one of them. If that means standing with the crows, so be it." Silence. Then a voice from the crowd. "Where do we go?" "No lord wants us south of the wall." Jon looked up at the dark sky. "Then we stop waiting for their permission." That night, a plan was born not just to unite the wildlings, but to make a home for them. A real one. Not in caves, not in abandoned forts, but in the gift the land just south of the wall, long abandoned, rich in resources, and claimed by no living soul strong enough to keep it. But taking it meant war. Not with the dead, yet but with the living. Lords of the North who saw wildlings as animals. Ygritte stepped forward. "They think we're savages. Then let's surprise them. Let's build, not burn. Let's show them we're more than they ever believed." Jon nodded. "But if they come for us with steel ... we won't kneel." The wildlings didn't cheer. They weren't children. But something passed through the crowd, something stronger than loyalty or fear. Hope. And behind that hope ... a readiness to fight for it. The gift stretched wide beneath the gray sky, untouched and wild. It was meant to be farmland, a gift from southern kings to the Night's Watch long ago. But like so many promises in the north, it had been abandoned. Now it was overgrown, scattered with broken fences and half-rotted cabins. Jon stood at the edge of a low ridge, surveying it all with Tormund and Ygritte by his side. "It's empty. No lords, no bannermen, no soldiers. Just cold earth and silence." Tormund grunted. "Good. Less men to kill." Ygritte didn't smile. "That silence won't last. The moment we raise tents, someone will ride south and cry about savages in their land." Jon nodded. "Let them cry. We'll build before they can burn us down." And so they began. It was nothing like the castles Jon had grown up in. There were no stonemasons or architects, just wildlings with frozen hands and stubborn hearts. They used wood from fallen trees, thatch from old huts, and strength from raw will. Tents turned to huts. Huts turned to longhouses. Fields were cleared, water was found, fires burned all night. The wildlings were rough, but they weren't fools. The women built faster than the men. The children ran wild, but watched everything. Old hunters taught young boys to trap and cook. Even the most bitter clans started working together, not because they loved each other, but because they'd all seen the same thing at Hardhome: death. Jon walked through the growing village at dusk, and for the first time in weeks, he heard something new. Laughter. It was small, brief, but real. Two children chasing each other around a cooking pot. A man teaching his daughter to swing an axe. A woman humming while weaving fur into blankets. He turned to Ygritte. Maybe it's working. She looked at him. Don't say that. You'll curse it. But even she was smiling. Still, peace is never a gift in the north. It's a debt waiting to be collected. It started with smoke. One morning, black clouds rose from the far hills. A rider arrived by dusk, his face cut, eyes wide. A raiding party? He gasped. Knights from last hearth? They say we've taken what's not ours. John's face went hard. How many? 50, maybe more. Steel horses. They've burned 2 of the outlying huts. No warning. Tormund slammed his fist into a tree. Cowards. They wait until we sleep, then light fire to homes with babes inside. Jon didn't wait. He called the leaders to meet in the central hall, what once was a barn. Torches lit the room. Angry voices filled the air. They want a fight. Give them one. Let's burn their lands like they burned ours. No, Jon said, raising his voice. We don't become what they think we are. If we strike first, we're just raiders again. They're already calling us that, Ygritte snapped. You want to wait until they kill more children? Jon looked at them all. We send a raven one chance. We ask for peace, not because we're weak, but because we're right. Murmurs filled the room. Some nodded, others cursed. Tormund stepped forward. And if they ignore the raven? Jon's eyes darkened. Then we bury them in the snow. The raven was sent. A message sealed by Jon's hand, bearing no sigil, just a warning and a plea. We build, not conquer. Leave us be, and we will do the same. Harm us again, and you will face the united free folk. For 2 days they waited. On the 3rd morning, the smoke came again, but this time closer. And with it, a flag of house umber. Jon, Ygritte, and Tormund rode out to meet them, taking a small group of armed wildlings. They found the knights near a burned field, armor shining, horses snorting steam. The Umber captain sat tall. You're trespassing, wildling. Jon rode forward. This land was abandoned. You haven't sent men here in 10 years. You built without permission. You don't ask for land. You take. We asked now, Jon said coldly. You ignored it. Then you burned our homes. The captain sneered. You'll be gone by winter. Or you'll be corpses. Jon didn't blink. If one more hut burns, we'll return the favor tenfold. Ygritte pulled her bow halfway. Tormund leaned forward in his saddle. Go home, little lord, before the snow drinks your blood. The knights rode off, but Jon knew what came next. Not peace, war. Snow fell again, that night heavier, thicker. The kind of snow that buried things. Paths, tracks, bodies. Jon stood outside the longhouse, staring into the dark. Inside, the wildlings sharpened blades, strung bows, and braided spears from the bones of fallen beasts. This wasn't training. This was preparation. Ygritte joined him, her cloak stiff with frost. The snow's hiding them. If they ride tonight, we won't see them until steel's in our throats. He didn't answer. His hand gripped the hilt of Loneclaw, like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. You thinking of riding to Winterfell? She asked. Begging them to call off their dogs? Jon turned his eyes toward her. Cold and steady. I'd rather die here than kneel again. A horn sounded in the distance, low, mournful. 3 blasts. Jon's heart clenched. Enemies. Approaching. The wildlings flooded out of huts, weapons raised, eyes wide. Tormund came storming through the snow like a bear, bloodlust already in his face. They come. Steel and fire. Just like I said they would. Jon climbed to the wooden watchtower they'd built only days ago. In the moonlight, he saw them. At least 70 riders, banners of house umber snapping in the wind, torches burning through the blizzard like angry stars. Jon raised a hand. Hold! The wildlings were ready to charge, but he needed them alive. This wasn't about bloodlust, it was about survival. The riders stopped just short of the first line of huts. One rode ahead. Same captain as before, face pale, eyes colder than the wind. You had your warning, the man shouted. This land belongs to the north. Jon stepped forward. So do I, the man sneered. You were born Stark blood, but you broke bread with savages. You're no better than them now. Tormund laughed darkly. Better than hiding behind steel and Daddy's name. The Umber captain ignored him. You've got until dawn. Leave, or we put your little village to the torch and feed your corpses to the crows. The silence that followed was thick, deadly. Then Jon said the words no one expected. Then try. He turned, his voice echoing behind him. Archers, ready. From the rooftops and tree posts, wildling archers raised their bows. Ygritte was already knocked and aiming, face calm, focused. You're making a mistake, the captain warned. Jon looked back, eyes burning. So are you. The captain snarled and rode back. The line of knights held still, then slowly backed away. Not because they surrendered, but because they weren't ready. Not yet. That night, Jon called a council. Inside the longhouse, the leaders of each clan sat in a wide circle, hard faces, sharper words. They won't stop, said an elder with deep scars. They'll return with more men, more fire. We hit them first, a younger warrior snapped. Raid last hearth. Show them we're not scared. Jon shook his head. If we burn, we prove them right. We can't win their game. So what then? Ygritte asked. Sit and wait to die? No, Jon said, rising. We fight. But on our ground, our way. Let them come. And when they do, they'll meet the wildlings they used to fear. Not savages, warriors, united, Tormund grinned. About time. They spent the next days fortifying everything. Spikes lined the paths. Traps were laid in the snow. Ditches dug and filled with frozen water. The children carried messages. The elders brewed oils for fire. And Jon? Jon walked among them all not as a lord, not as a crow, but as one of them. He helped carry logs. He taught young boys how to swing a blade. He sat with grieving mothers and told them why this mattered. Not for land, not for pride, but for freedom. Winter's here, he told them, and it won't care who you are. Only who stands together. The wildlings listened, and for the first time in history, the free folk were one. At dawn, the horn sounded again. This time, not 3 blasts, 5, not just enemies, armies, more than one, and they were coming fast. Jon Snow stepped into the snow, lone claw drawn. Then we end this before it begins. The earth trembled under the weight of war. From the watchtower, Jon saw it, all 3 columns of armored men riding through the snow, their banners flapping like vultures in a blizzard. House Umber, House Karstark, and even men, bearing Bolton colors, though Ramsay himself was long dead. Still, his cruelty lived on in the steel of northern swords. Ygritte stood beside Jon, her face pale but fierce. 3 houses. They brought half the north to kill us. Tormund snorted, spitting into the snow. Then we bury half the north before supper. But Jon wasn't smiling. They don't come to fight. They come to end us. All of us. The village below was alive with motion. Wildlings rushed into trenches. Women armed themselves. Children herded toward the caves where they'd hide. No one cried. They'd cried enough already. Now it was war. Jon raised his hand, and the war horn sounded. The old bear horn from Mance Rayder's time, long forgotten, now screamed into the frozen sky. One long, haunting note. The free folk stood, ready. The northern army halted just beyond the field, where the snow had thinned into slush and mud. A lone rider came forward again, bearing a white flag. But no one moved. Jon waited. The rider stopped within shouting distance. A new man this time, younger, leaner. A Karstark, judging by the black sun stitched on his cloak. "You are trespassing on Northman land," the man called out. "This is your final warning. Lay down your arms, surrender the land, or we burn you out of it." Jon stepped forward, alone. This land was abandoned. We made it live again. It's not yours to take. The man shouted. Jon's voice was calm, but it carried like thunder. "We're not asking. We're staying." The rider's face twisted. "You'll die for it," Jon nodded. "Then so be it." The rider turned without another word. Jon walked back to his people, where the wildlings stood behind spikes and burning torches. Ygritte met his eyes. "Well?" "They're coming." Tormund cracked his neck and grabbed his axe. "Good. I was getting cold." The horns blared. Arrows were lit, spears raised. And the first wave hit. Northern cavalry thundered toward the barricades, thinking this would be easy scare the wildlings, break their lines, finish the myth of the free folk once and for all. But what they met was not fear. They met fire. Oil was poured into trenches and lit as riders approached, turning snow into flame. Screaming horses toppled, armored men burned alive, and chaos erupted. The wildlings screamed with them, not in terror, but in fury. Tormund led the first charge through the fire, roaring like a monster. He swung his axe and split a knight's helmet clean down the center. Grit's arrows flew like death from the rooftops. Every time a soldier raised his sword, another arrow sank into his throat. Jon fought near the center. Calm, brutal. Lone Claw glowed red with firelight, cutting down man after man. He moved like a storm, silent, merciless. And yet the Northerners kept coming. They had numbers, steel, horses. For every one man the wildlings killed, 2 more rose behind him. A Karstark warhorn blew from the back lines. Another wave. Jon looked around. His people were tiring. His traps were breaking. The line was bending. Then came the worst sound of all, screaming, high-pitched, from the rear. The caves. "They're in the back," someone yelled. "They flanked us." Jon turned, heart sinking. The bastards had sent a hidden party around the side, straight to the women and children. Ygritte was already running. "They'll kill the little ones." Jon followed her, blood pumping like ice. At the mouth of the cave, he saw the horror men in bolton armor, dragging children, cutting down old women, setting fire to the makeshift shelter. He screamed, pure rage pouring from his lungs. No mercy. He charged. So did Ygritte, faster than him. She put 3 arrows in 3 men's skulls before Jon reached them. And she pulled her dagger and fought like a wildcat. Jon reached the last Bolton soldier as he tried to grab a girl by the hair. Jon didn't swing his sword. He punched, again and again, until the man stopped moving. The girl stared at him, shaking. Jon knelt. "You're safe now." But deep down, he knew they weren't. They were surviving, but only just. And the cost was growing. As the fires burned low and the screens faded, Jon looked up at the sky. Snow was falling again. And in that quiet moment, he realized something. This wasn't the real war. That was still coming with blue eyes and no soul. The morning after the battle smelled of blood and ash. Bodies lay frozen in the snow, Northmen and wildlings alike. Crows circled overhead, waiting for the silence to last. Jon stood among the wreckage, blood on his face, Lone Claw heavy in his hand. Around him, children cried for fathers who would never rise again. Mothers dug through snow for their sons. Fire crackled and shattered huts. They had survived, barely. Tormund limped toward him, his red beard soaked with blood. "Half our fighters are dead. The rest can't stand. If they come again?" "They won't," Jon said, but he didn't believe it. Ygritte arrived, dragging the arm of a wounded soldier. "Their lords lost too much," she said. "They'll wait now, regroup, maybe send a raven to Winterfell, beg for help." Jon nodded. "Let them beg. We've bled enough for one war." But even as he spoke, he felt it deep in his chest. This wasn't over. Not even close. That night, the temperature dropped so low, the firewood snapped like bones. The wind howled through the valley like a dying wolf. And somewhere beyond the trees, they heard something else. A horn, but not a wildling horn. Not a northern one either. A sound no living man should ever hear again. Low, deep, cold, the White Walkers. Jon shot up from his bedroll, heart thundering. He met Ygritte's eyes. She'd heard it too. The guards were already yelling when they climbed the watchtower. Torches swung wildly. Men shouted at the darkness. Jon took the spyglass from a shaking hand, looked north, and he saw them. Not riders, not raiders. The dead. Hundreds, no thousands. Moving across the snow like a wave. Silent, endless, led by figures of ice. Eyes like frozen stars. The Night King wasn't with them, not yet. But his captains were. And the sky above them grew darker, like even the moon was afraid. Jon stepped down, calm but urgent. "Wake everyone. We leave now." Ygritte frowned. "Where?" "South," Tormund growled. "You said we'd never kneel. That we'd stay. I said we'd survive." He turned to the villagers' men with missing limbs, women clutching children, boys not yet strong enough to hold a sword. "If we stay, we die. This land isn't worth feeding the dead. But we take what we built and move. Together." "But they'll chase us," said one woman. "There's nowhere left to run." Jon's voice hardened. "Then we don't run. We retreat. And we make our stand with those who still breathe." At Winterfell, murmurs, doubt, but no one offered a better plan. And so they left. That night, under the light of a blood-red moon, the free folk abandoned the home they'd fought to build. Fires were put out. Dead were left unburied. No time, no strength. Only the road south remained. But as they marched, something strange happened. When they reached the edge of the gift, they found sentries waiting. Not enemies, Stark men. One of them stepped forward, holding a black banner with a white direwolf. "Lord Davos sent us. Jon Snow's kin spoke for you." "Jon froze? My kin?" The soldier nodded. "Lady Sansa. She said if you were still alive, to bring you home." Home. Jon looked back at his people, scarred, broken, but alive. Then he looked south. Winterfell. He turned to the soldier. "Then we come. But we don't come as beggars." "No," the soldier said, his voice quiet. "You come as the last hope of the North." That night, as they camped one last time before reaching Winterfell, Jon sat with Ygritte and Tormund by the fire. "We'll never be free," Ygritte said softly. Jon looked at her. "No, but maybe we'll still be alive," Tormund chuckled, teeth flashing in the firelight. "Alive's better than pretty." And in the distance, far beyond the reach of warmth or mercy, the White Walkers kept marching. Because war wasn't coming anymore. It had already begun.